Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about how we can solve global climate change by growing food in skyscrapers. That's why I was super excited when I learned about this new concept called global climate farming. This is actually a really big deal because, if you don't know, agriculture is responsible for 24% of the greenhouse gases emitted each year. This company has a vision to address two of the most critical problems facing our planet today: climate change and food security. One of their co-founders has a master's degree in sustainable agriculture, and so he looked at all the different methods for growing food and decided to take the most efficient path forward. Instead, they're focusing on growing crops that are difficult to grow in a conventional way. So this means that vertical farms can grow a wider variety of crops than greenhouses, while slashing the amount of energy required to grow them. See, vertical farms are very expensive to build. It costs around $1 million per square acre to set one up. Climate farms are vertical farms that are powered by carbon-neutral fuels. This means that instead of using electricity from the grid, they use things like hydrogen, biomethane, and even biogas to power their operations. So it makes sense that companies like AppHarvest have focused on just selling high-margin crops in order to justify the cost. The reason is that these crops have higher profit margins, and therefore they are able to pay more for the energy needed to run these facilities. This includes leafy greens, herbs, vegetables, and fruits. This process is called carbon sequestration. In other words, the plants are literally eating up the CO2 we've put into the atmosphere. And they have a really cool plan to do this. It starts with the world's tallest indoor farm. When forests are cut down for agriculture or other purposes, they release large amounts of stored carbon back into the atmosphere. By spreading their charcoal on barren soil, they're helping to rebuild topsoil and re-establish native plants. This is a win-win situation because they're able to produce food while also reducing emissions and restoring ecosystems. This contributes to climate change and reduces biodiversity. Climate farms are also tackling another important issue: food waste. When food is grown conventionally, it's often picked before it's ripe so that it can be transported over long distances without spoiling. This results in bland-tasting food that doesn't last very long once it reaches your plate. Well, the truth is that this technology is still in its early stages. And while AppHarvest has made some great progress, they still need more funding to scale up their operations. Instead of discarding this biomass, they turn it into charcoal and store it underground. This helps them achieve a negative carbon footprint. If they can raise enough money, they'll be able to build more climate farms and bring their delicious, sustainably grown food to more people around the world. The main reason is that agriculture is just too big of a sector to be replaced by vertical farming alone. Since their vertical farms are located close to where the food is consumed, there's no need to transport food over long distances. Replacing all of these farms with vertical ones would take decades, if not centuries. It's not to mention the fact that there simply isn't enough space in cities to build the number of vertical farms. It's needed to replace conventional agriculture. But they can certainly help us grow food in a more efficient and sustainable way. If you did, please hit the thumbs up button. It really helps me out. And consider subscribing to my channel. I make videos about technology and the future of our industry every single week. And since they can control the environment so precisely, they can grow food that's perfectly ripe and ready to eat. It's like having your own personal vegetable garden in the middle of the city. They're doing everything they can to make this entire supply chain net zero by 2030. As I mentioned earlier, these crops include leafy greens, herbs, vegetables, and fruits. Then I think they'll have a real shot at making a significant impact. But it also includes medicinal plants that are in high demand, but difficult to grow in a conventional way. Aren't they just adding more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere? Well, no. That's because these fuels are produced using renewable energy, meaning that there is no net emission of carbon dioxide. Their vertical farms can be built in cities, reducing the need to transport food over long distances. They've even partnered with a major grocery chain to open a vertical farm in one of their stores in Singapore. I did an interview with the CEO and founder of a company that is trying to implement these ideas, and it was fascinating. Biomethane and biogas are created by capturing carbon dioxide from the air and combining it with hydrogen. This means that they can suck more carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere than they emit. How is this possible? Well, plants naturally absorb carbon dioxide as part of their growth process. This process, known as direct air capture, is already being used to remove millions of tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere each year. Right now, there is only one way to grow these types of plants, and that is in highly controlled greenhouses. But greenhouses are very energy efficient, and they are limited to low-latitude regions, where they can receive enough sunlight to grow crops. These limitations are what's holding back the supply of medicinal plants and driving up prices. By growing food in vertical farms, we can cut out all emissions from transportation, reduce the amount of land we use for agriculture, and slash water consumption by up to 95%. This path starts with vertical farming and then connects to processing, storage, distribution, and retail. And one of the most interesting things I learned from my conversation with their CEO is that they not just trying to replace conventional agriculture entirely. They're also looking at growing medicinal plants that have a huge market, but require very strict controls. The great thing about vertical farms is that they can be located anywhere, and they use artificial lighting that's much more efficient than greenhouse glass. Now let's get back to the topic of this video, which is the concept of global climate farming. But that doesn't help us feed more people or reduce emissions from agriculture. So AppHarvest came up with the idea of creating climate farms. Using these fuels allows them to emit up to 80% less CO2 than conventional agriculture and up to 90% less than greenhouses. That's pretty amazing. Now you might be thinking to yourself, but why would they want to use these fuels? Hydrogen, for example, can be made by splitting water molecules using electricity generated from wind or solar power. What's even more remarkable is that climate farms can be used to produce negative emissions. By growing more plants and storing their biomass, we can lock away carbon for hundreds or even thousands of years. When AppHarvest grows medicinal plants, for example, they end up with a bunch of biomass that can't be used in their products. And that's not all. Climate farms are also helping to restore ecosystems. But climate farms are changing that by using the same biomass to restore degraded lands. Another great thing about climate farms is that they don't need a lot of space. This farm will grow leafy greens and herbs for customers to pick up and eat right away. But wait, there's more. But climate farms are changing that by growing food on demand. This means that you'll never have to throw away wilted lettuce or moldy bread again, so you might be wondering what the catch is. If climate farms are so amazing, why haven't we heard of them before? Vertical farms have been around for a few decades, but they've only recently become commercially viable. That's why they've launched an IPO, which is a way of raising money by selling shares of their company to the public. So if you're interested in investing in this company, I'll leave a link in the description below. Now here's the thing. While I think this is a really cool idea, it's probably not going to have a major impact on climate change anytime soon. For example, there are over 570 million farms in the world that produce a wide variety of crops. However, what I do think this idea has the potential to do is to change the way we produce high-value crops that are currently grown in greenhouses. If this company can scale up their operations and prove that they can produce these crops at a lower cost than greenhouses, while emitting fewer greenhouse gases. In the meantime, though, I think it's important to remember that vertical farms aren't going to save the planet anyway. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Alright, thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.